Hey, you guys, welcome back. Thank you for being here, all that good stuff. My name is Madeleine Klein, and I talk about Canadian true crime, missing persons, mystery, and history. If you caught last week's video on the Mount Cashel Orphanage in Newfoundland, you will know that I'm doing a small series on church scandals and mass abuse cases. I wanted to start with an older case and then talk about a more recent one because although these cases are decades and provinces apart, the similarities are uncanny. Today, we're going to be talking about the Legacy Christian Academy and Mile 2 Church in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, how it's a cult, the mass abuse that's gone on for over 40 years, the covering up of that abuse, and the $25 million class action lawsuit that's going on right now. Caitlin Erickson is one of the main plaintiffs in this class action lawsuit and the first victim to come forward. Kate is the reason I know about and follow this case, and she was kind enough to sit down and chat with me about what's happening right now, and I'll be sharing some of our conversation. I will put a trigger warning onto this video: severe child abuse, physical, emotional, spiritual, sexual. Also, I apologize in advance if my storytelling is a little bit chaotic and all over the place. There's just a lot of information and people named, but I'm going to do my best to keep everything clear and organized.
Never been about, like, this isn't a war on Christianity. There's a lot of people in our student group who do identify themselves as religious still, or identify with something spiritual. So it's just really, if you cannot run a religious place without abusing children, you need to rethink your platform.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for this specific case, and like you specifically, when you said you graduated in 2005, my brother graduated in 2005. So like you and my brother and I are only 6 years apart. And all of your stories, what you're explaining, I read the entire
Statement of claim.
Statement of claim, thank you. And when people think about, cases like this or abuse like this, they picture a 1960s mental asylum.
Yeah.
And no, like this happened, and it might still happen today. Like,
yeah. And I mean, I've said that to people. I'm like, I'm 35. Like, this is, yes, the, Minister of Education keeps saying, oh, they're historical. I'm 35.
No.
This didn't happen that long ago.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I think, yeah, that's what really gets me too. This isn't historical. This is fresh and still a big problem. So,
it is, yeah.
So a little history. The Legacy Christian Academy was formerly known as the Christian Center Academy, and it was opened up in 1982 by a man named Keith Johnson. The academy was for students K to 12, and the Mile 2 Church was like just the connected church. The curriculum was based on ACE, Accelerated Christian Education, which is a terribly lackluster, misogynistic, and racist curriculum. It was also based heavily on Keith Johnson's own viewpoints. Allow me to read a few passages that have unfortunately fallen out of Keith's trap. Buckle up, I know you're not prepared for this. I'm sorry, I'm not memorizing these, and my laptop sounds like an airplane taking off, so just bear with me. So, direct quotes from Keith Johnson. If you desire for your child to become obedient and willing to accept God's standards as his own, you will have to utilize the process that God designed to obtain those results. That sounds like a threat. When I was a child, I often wanted to run through the house, jump on the furniture, yell at my parents, and be ill-mannered at the table. But my dad hadn't been trained in the handling of hyperactive children. At such times, how I would have loved some medication. But Dad didn't know he was supposed to give me medication. Instead, he gave me a spanking. I wasn't nearly as hyperactive after he got through with me. We apply the same standards of response to hyperactive children in our Christian school, and the problem isn't a problem for long. Because of this, God has commanded parents to discipline their children, spank them, counsel them, teach them the awfulness of sin and the results of doing wrong. This one might be the worst. Sometimes spankings will leave marks on the child. If some liberal were to hear this, they'd immediately charge us with advocating child beating. Child beating is when an enraged parent who doesn't love his child begins to beat up on him or her. Heaven forbid they use the word they. What is the purpose in spanking our children? Primarily, it is to teach them that sin is wrong and that sin is always punished and that sin always hurts them more than anyone else. Therefore, if we're going to make a believer out of them, we're going to need to ensure that the punishment is severe enough to make a lasting impression. Occasionally, proper discipline may leave welts. Yeah, these last couple are actually the worst. An undisciplined child is unteachable, repulsive, rebellious, and foolish. If we didn't have discipline in our academy, we couldn't control our students at all. Spanking should be a ritual. A ritual is any practice regularly repeated in a set, precise manner. Have him bend over and apply the paddle firmly. Don't permit any wiggling around or jumping around. Don't allow any pre-discipline howling or sniveling. Don't let his crying and begging diminish the degree or severity of punishment. As the head of the household, it is the father's responsibility to see that the mode and method and rules of discipline are carried out and agreed upon. Never keep secrets from one another. Be sure not to gripe at and verbally harass your children. Mothers particularly need to guard against this. So Keith Johnson, as we can tell, was big into corporal punishment, along with the rest of the staff at this facility. Spanking or paddling was a common form of discipline, and you could be punished for anything. Literally anything. This list includes whispering during church or class, talking back, being disrespectful or disobeying. Quote, refusing to provide satisfactory answers to inquiries. So this means if you didn't tell them what they wanted to hear, you would get beaten. Cheating or dishonesty, being caught within 6 inches of the opposite sex, not crying during punishment. The abuse and fear was so bad at this school, some of the students would wear padding. They knew that they would be getting spanked, so they would wear extra padding under their pants, and if they were found to be wearing this, they could get punished. You could get punished for not completing your homework and not incriminating your fellow classmates, which that kind of falls under not telling them what they want to hear. Even just being alleged of doing anything that I just mentioned could result in punishment.
Even hearing from people, so Keith Johnson came to Saskatoon in the early 80s. He's from Plainview, Texas. And I've had people from Plainview, Texas, who were his students back then, who have reached out to me.
Oh,
and they
my
said,
gosh.
Your story, they said, like, reading your guys' stories is like reading our own stories. Like, it is exactly the same. And he had a little operation in Plainview, and then he picked up and came to Canada and did the exact same thing.
Legacy Christian Academy was a cult under the guise of a church. This institution controlled every aspect of their students' lives, including their families and time spent at home. Kate attended Legacy Christian Academy from 1992 to 2005, so that was 4 to 17 years old, and she suffered terribly alongside her peers. These kids were indoctrinated. I would even go as far as to say tortured. Students were subjected to physical abuse, being spanked with either a hand or a paddle. They were forced to watch or listen to others being abused. They were bent over a chair or a pew, physically assaulted, and then be forced to pray with their abuser afterward. I guess they would not only display these paddles to instill more fear into the students, they would sell them. These students were paddled so hard, they were sometimes left with bruises on their thighs or sometimes left limping afterwards. And some victims still suffer from nerve damage. There was one specific Monday in the fall of 2003, Kate and the rest of the volleyball team were lined up and paddled for giggling during church the Friday prior. Kate was once struck so hard she was left limping, and as a result of limping was punished with more physical exercise. Absolutely no one was safe at this school. Even disabled students were targeted and cruelly treated. Physically disabled students would be tasked with difficult and repetitive physical expectations. Those mentally challenged were expected to perform academically as if they were not. When they couldn't provide satisfactory answers or work, they would be physically punished. If you didn't cry during a punishment, it would be viewed as not accepting the punishment and result in more abuse. And just the emotional and mental abuse that went on and the manipulation was horrific. At one point, Kate would not cry while being punished, and they said something to her to the effect of, "I wonder if your sister would think the same way." So that's mental torture. Kate's best friend and neighbor growing up, Coy Nolan, is also one of the main plaintiffs in the class action lawsuit and also suffered horribly at Legacy Christian Academy. At the age of 11, he was spanked 3 times for telling inappropriate jokes. When he was 15, he was in the hospital just because he was sick, and the director of the school, John Olubobokin, came to Coy's hospital room and started to sermonize. Coy obviously asked him to leave, which resulted in Coy being punished when he got back to school for asking this guy to leave his hospital room. And that's not even the worst of it. On the suspicion of being a homosexual, John Olubobokin and his wife performed an exorcism on Coy in his own home. This place operated as a cult, and students did report the abuse. However, it was either handled within the church or just completely fell on deaf ears. Like, this is not a thing of the past. And how I just can't believe that this cult got away with it for so long. And they continue to do so. This isn't an isolated incident. There's no way. It's bizarre how religion bleeds into government still today.
Absolutely.
How do we stop it? How do I'm baffled. I'm speechless.
It's been really interesting through this whole process in coming forward, hearing from students, even the, students who attended before me, who are a lot older than me, attended in the 80s, and hearing their stories. And, I've been told by some of them just about how, there was Saskatoon police members who attended the church at that time. So there was one specific individual who, former students and their parents were told, if you have any issues, like, you come directly to me and I'll, help you navigate it. So even outside the church, they were trying to control the narrative and trying to control people's ability to speak up. So that part, and, that's even flowed into, I don't know if you've seen the stories about Mark Drapak, who attended, and he was sent away to Canaan land for 2 years. And there wasn't anywhere to send females, teenage girls. And so instead of, because there was nowhere to send them, parents were actually told by leadership in the church to put their teenage girls into foster care. So there are 3 girls that attended that were actually put into foster care because, the church said, your teenager is acting out and is rebellious. You need to just write them off, put them into foster care. So, and actually, because of that happening is how a lot of stuff actually came forward to the police, because these girls disclosed, to foster parents or to their social workers, some of the things that were going on. So yeah, they're just like this. It's like pulling one thread, but there's a million threads, and the stories just keep coming out, and there's more to come out, and there's so much dark history at this place. And it's at the point, it's rotten to the core, and the government has definitely played a hand in aiding and abetting this place. So
they somehow controlled members of the school and church in their own homes. Kate didn't want to play volleyball in her senior year of high school, and even her mother called and said, no, Caitlin will not be playing volleyball. They threatened to not give her the credits she needed to graduate, holding her back in the school another year. If you were a member of the church, you were not allowed to associate with anyone who wasn't. That right there makes it a cult. Students weren't allowed to date each other, and like I mentioned previously, they were always watched and accused of wrongdoing. They were constantly interrogated and intimidated. even during your summers, they somehow out
Mhm.
in the home, they somehow controlled families outside of the school, church, whatever. And yeah, like voluntold you to, volunteer at summer camp, somehow withheld credits.
Mhm.
How did this how was this able to fly for so long? Do you think that social media has really helped? Because I think this has gone on for, decades and decades and decades. No one had a voice. Anyone, you know, a journalists could try and make a case public, but if the publicist wants to kibosh it, they will. And that has happened. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering if new age social media has put a trajectory into I don't know, justice or getting voices heard, because it's been swept under the rug for so long.
I think for sure that definitely plays a part in it, and definitely plays a part in getting the information out to the people that need to hear it. In the past, there has been reporters who have done pieces on the school and church, and after a month or two, people kind of forgot. And
Right.
the one time there was, a mass exodus of people that left the church, and this was like 93-ish maybe.
Oh, wow.
And these people came forward and spoke to the press. Like, they did quite a lengthy story in the Star Phoenix, and the church responded by taking out a whole page in the Star Phoenix saying, "We forgive you." Like, just so pretentious and acting like, the church is the victim of these people speaking their truth.
Ugh.
So I do, though, on the other side of things, I mean, there have been people who have gone to the police about this place. There have been students themselves, me included, who have called places like social services, and they didn't do anything. So, I mean, I was a high school student and I used to walk over to the public library, and there used to be a courtesy phone there, and I would call social services and I would tell them what was going on. And they
And
would be
nothing
like,
would.
"Yeah, we've heard things, we've heard a lot of rumors about that place, but, like, your parents choose to send you there." That was their response.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, so they're definitely, the mindset of, what even they view, I guess, as worthy of their attention has probably changed, I would hope by now. But the police definitely, I mean, when I went in, I had a great experience with police, like,
Good.
now, and, very understanding, and, you know, was very good in interviewing me as, someone talking about many, many years of abuse, because I was there from K to 12. So that part, and all the students who have come forward to have echoed the same thing, that they have had a really good experience, which has been great. Because you don't
Awesome.
want that part to be re-traumatizing.
Well, that's
Um,
right. I was gonna say, so you graduated in 2005, you got the heck out of here,
yeah.
rightfully so. Um, you did what you had to do. You got therapy, you got, what word did you use?
Oh, deprogramming.
Deprogramming. I love that.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you realize I have to report this? Like I have to do something. And like was there a period of time where you were apprehensive about doing it because of the history with social services and police and everything, or were you fairly confident this time around that you knew something's got to give?
So I initially at the school, they told us, they were like, everything we're doing is legal. And I mean, like, that kind of was always the conversation. It was like, this is totally legal. And nobody really questioned it, nor at the time would there have been anybody with the amount of education to actually break that down too. And
Well, and you're a
I
product of
mean,
your environment,
yeah.
if
And
that's what you grew up in.
as an adult, my education background is in justice. And I did definitely, as I was going through university, there was a few things that didn't sit well with me. And I was like, hey, I'm like, I don't think this was completely legal. And I ended up having some conversations with some people that are high up in the justice system here in Saskatchewan, and just, talking to them about my experience. And that it was kind of like started off jokingly. They were bugging me because they were like, you never talk about where you grew up, where you went to school. Like, are you even from this province? And I was like, well, yeah, born and raised in Saskatoon. And so, and I kind of told them a little bit, and they were like, whoa, 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 like that's totally illegal. And I was like, no, no, but the
Wow.
ban was in 2004. And they were like, no, no, but there were still rules around it. It wasn't a free for all that you could just corporally punish kids in school. There were still very strict guidelines around it. And those guidelines aligned with the provincial child abuse protocols. So then I was like, oh, okay. So then I started doing some research, and I was like, saw that, and I was like, okay, yeah. So a lot of this, like 99% was illegal, actually, what they were doing. So then I was like, okay, I need to sit down and try and put 12 years into a police statement. So I started, taking notes and writing down, incidents and dates. And then it just kind of got to, well, actually, before I went in, I found out that the former director of my school was running another school in Saskatoon, that he had actually opened his own school. Now, I knew he had been fired from my school after I graduated, a few years after, but I didn't know that he had gone and was operating his own school. So that was absolutely terrifying to me because, yeah. So I was like, yep, that was a big motivation for me coming forward as well, because I was like, there's no way this individual has changed. So through that process, I also started talking about it on TikTok, and I kind of like to call it the light launch about it, because I started gently talking about it without mentioning names, without mentioning places. And then I had people DMing me, and they were like, this is in Saskatoon, right? And it was
Oh
our,
my
and I was like,
gosh.
okay, I'm like, why are you asking me this? And I got this DM one time, and the person was like, this sounds exactly like the director of Grace Academy. Did you go to Grace Academy? And I was like, no, but I was at the school he was at before. So
Oh
I was
my
like, so
gosh.
this is a pattern of behavior that he's still exhibiting, even though he got fired and he went to open his own, another school. And like, what a failure on the Ministry of Education. This person is fired from Christian Center Academy and then is given public funds to open Grace Academy in Saskatoon. Just absolutely insane. No checks and balances going on at all.
Do we know
So,
how that ends up being is it just because it's a boys club?
oh, a big part of it is that,
Yeah.
and just
Because
not
same
doing
same
not
thing
doing
with
your
the
job,
Dustin
really.
Duncan thing.
Yeah, not doing your
Like,
job. I mean, when you're breezing in to do school inspections, and you're spending 15 minutes in the school having coffee with the principal, and half the inspections don't even list you putting eyes on students. I mean, that's a problem. You're not doing your job. So the bare minimum wasn't, that bare minimum inspection reports weren't even being done properly. So yeah, so in kind of that, and like talking about it and hearing other people from his current school, it was like, okay, this needs to happen. So then I did come forward. I like walked into Saskatoon Police Station. I'm sure I looked like a crazy person. I had my yearbooks with me, notes written, sticky notes, and I was just like, here you go. And I
you
actually
came
like put everything
prepared.
down on the desk, and I just started bawling. And the officer was like, this is historical, isn't it? And I was like, yep. So they put me in a room and gave me like a bunch of paper, and I just sat and I like just kept writing and writing and writing, and it was like page after page after page after page. And I just I was like, okay. And I'm like, I've done it. They have the information at least. And it was like that weight of taking that, because once I knew all this stuff was illegal, there was such a weight on myself that it was like, I didn't speak up. So there's other people that are being affected, and I'm hearing these stories from Grace. And I was like, no, like this is not acceptable. And so, and I kind of released that burden to the Saskatoon police, and they, it's in their hands. And I mentioned it to a couple other people, and it just started the trickle of people coming in, and it snowballed and turned into a civil action. So yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Did you float out of that police station? Were you a feather just
It
like, did you
yeah.
feel so relieved after?
And it
You
was,
had
yeah,
to.
such relief,
Oh,
but just like and the responsibility is off me now. I have
oh,
done my part as far as, making sure the right people know, and there we go. And
absolutely.
I thought, like, my thinking going in was that I would be doing this by myself. It would be me, like, taking down these certain individuals, and that would be it. And I never expected the amount of students and people to come forward, and
Wow.
people be there, to support me, and, for me to be able to support them as they're coming forward. I just didn't imagine it ever to turn into what it has. So, and, I'm really thankful too, just for even my, community on TikTok, for just kind of giving me a little bit of the push too, to just be like, no, this is wrong. Like, this isn't normal. Because when you grow up in it, it's your normal. You think this is normal. It's not
Absolutely.
right, but it's all you know.
Well, and the pushback you personally have gotten throughout this
Mhm.
whole ordeal, the fact that you haven't backed down is unbelievable and fantastic. But just going back a little bit to reporting and everything, we know that there are more victims yet
Mhm.
to come forward. There is no statute of limitations on child abuse in Saskatchewan or Canada.
Saskatchewan.
It's Saskatchewan. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, how long was it from police report being made to you being contacted about something that this was going to go forward and something was going to happen? Or was that more you? Did you really raise your voice and got things rolling?
Well, so, like, none of the people that I've put police reports in about, none of them have been charged yet. So
Okay.
they're, the police have said to me, like, yes, like, we believe there's things to charge here on. They've said that. But obviously, in our province, we do things a little bit differently than some places, where the crown kind of has this say on historical stuff, if they can charge people on things. So, which is a little scary. And, whereas things should really be looked at just strictly from the criminal code, and it's like, does this meet the criteria of that? Yes or no?
Right.
But there is actually, like, a committee in Regina that decides if they're going to allow police to press charges, and what charges on certain things. And a
Oh,
lot of people
wow.
don't know that. So, I have nothing negative to say about the police. They've been great, but the thing that doesn't sit well with me is that some of these people are running around in our communities, and they could be having daycares, they could be, in a position of authority with children. And without some of these, the length of time it's taken for, some stuff, it's still being investigated by the Crown's office, is what they're saying. So
It's a
it
little
is a
alarming,
very
the lack of
long
urgency.
time. It
Like
is,
this
yeah.
is we're talking about children here.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's bizarre. The fact that they didn't just pull the plug right away, like 55 students came forward. These allegations obviously are not for nothing. Pull the pull the plug. Like what are we doing? What are we waiting for? It's
Yeah, it is baffling. It's
Well, and
it's
how far does
it's
this go?
frustrating.
Because how many facilities does this church operate? Because you're one. I don't know if you went to school with this man that got sent to Canaan land or wherever, but so how many of these facilities are floating around that they're just
Yeah, so
shipping kids
Mark
to?
is quite a bit older than me, so I mean,
Okay.
we would have maybe been in, oh yeah, we would have been in school at the same time, but I would have been in elementary school. But yeah, there was Leader Christian Academy as well, which was operated in Leader, Saskatchewan, operated by the church, and they opened City Center on 20th Street in Saskatoon. They opened that, and they don't have any really association with it now, but I mean that place was originally opened by them. So yeah, there's a few different places.
The laws surrounding corporal punishment at the time, and you won't believe this, were you could only corporally punish a child between the ages of 2 and 12, and you couldn't use a weapon. So, like, just your hand, I guess. This was ruled by the Supreme Court in 2004, but the officials at this school decided the rules didn't apply to them. The abuse against these students went on their entire time spent at the facility from numerous perpetrators. Nathan Schultz has numerous sexual assault allegations against him from at least 3 women dating back to the 90s. Nathan was the son of church elders, and his dad was the director of the school at the time. I believe it was Olaboboken. Nathan was a Sunday school teacher in his teens and listed as a school babysitter. He would be the one to volunteer to take little girls as young as 4 to the bathroom. He would put candy on his genitals and make them take it off of him with either their hands or their mouth. He would cut a hole in his pocket and force these little girls to reach in and grab him. One of the most horrifying aspects of this case to me is when Kate was in her teens, she tried to report this abuse. She told an unqualified school counselor and ended up in the director's office. Kate was screamed at point blank in her face by the director, John Olaboboken, for telling lies. And she was forced to apologize to Nathan's family. What's the best case scenario for all of these defendants? Are we looking at jail time? What's
So with the class action, you're not looking at jail time because it's a civil action. So that's a
right?
little bit different. With there are approximately 55 plus students who have come forward criminally, though, which is a completely separate legal process.
Okay.
So those things are still being investigated with, I mean, obviously Aaron's been charged, so he and his stuff, I would say, was by far the easiest to really lay a charge in, just because so many people knew about it. It wasn't something that was hidden very well, and
Oh,
he was moved to another province by the pastor, so a lot of people knew about that one. So it was pretty hard. You'd have to they could put any of the leadership team at the church on the stand. They know about that one. So, yeah. So, I mean, and it's great for Jen to have some closure because it was a pretty blatant thing that went on for quite a while. So, the rest of us, there's a lot of stuff that is, what they consider historical. So it does take, police a fair bit of time to investigate, and then they hand the files off to the Crown, and the Crown does their own kind of research and investigation. And a lot of that is, looking at case law in Canada, looking at, exactly what the laws were at the time, and yeah, just kind of, and seeing like how many times were the police called and stuff, because there are, I can speak on my own, as a victim of Nathan Schultz. The police were well aware of this individual, because there had been now 3 police complaints that I know of where parents, their children had come to them and said, this man offended against me, and they called Saskatoon police. So And this was all in the 90s. So they were aware. And I mean, they didn't follow up on anything. Social services wasn't called. There wasn't anything done at the time. So that part we're hoping that they really address things this time, because there's several victims of that one individual.
I'm going to link the statement of claim below. You can read the document if you like, but be warned. It's graphic and disturbing what these people went through as children. Joel Hall allegedly paddled a student 3 times a day, every day, for 2 months for not completing a homework assignment. The staff at Legacy Christian Academy were sadistic and cruel, and their main goal was to corporately punish students, pin them against each other, and just be generally evil. Where are we right now in the legacy of abuse? I know we just had a court date with Aaron Benowise. Are you provided with like a schedule on how this is going to work, or what can we expect in the future?
Well, I was in court. There was quite a few of us students who were in court the day he had first appearance. He wasn't there though, but his lawyer appeared by phone. So it got adjourned. So then, just the next court date is the 23rd. So, as many of us can be there to support the victim, we'll be there. And yeah, I mean, right now his stuff is the only thing that's going through court at the moment. So.
Oh, okay. So I think that answers my next question. Where the hell's Keith Johnson? What's going on with him?
Yeah, we know he's been frequenting Amarillo, Texas. He's often, people send me pictures of him
No
from
way.
Amarillo. Yeah, I've had people, like several people actually reach out to me from Amarillo. I actually got sent a picture of him in a restaurant the one day, and it was someone that had seen one of my TikToks and
Oh
it
my
was like, hey,
God.
that's that guy. Snapped a picture and sent it to me. And we know the area where he's hanging out, and several attempts have been made to serve him. He is actively evading service, and a judge has ruled that. So he's conditionally served by the courts in Canada right now. So yeah, we're hoping to get him served in person soon though.
Avoiding service doesn't sound very godly to me. What would Jesus think, Keith? The staff at this school weren't and aren't even qualified educators. Yet this school was and is receiving $750,000 of taxpayer funds. How can we help? How can we help with the case in general? How can we support victims? What can we do?
I mean, I think so. As a student group, one thing we've, advocated for is just for Ministry of Ed to use public school curriculum in these schools. If you're going to allow private Christian schools to operate, then you need to, at least to the benefit of the children attending these schools, have proper education. So we've asked for that. We've asked for them to only have certified teachers teaching, and teachers that can be registered with the regulatory board, because that is a huge part of the issue as well, is they have a lot of faux teachers teaching, and
And I
nobody
had no
regulates
idea.
them.
I had
Nobody
no
regulates
idea
them.
until I
Yeah.
started researching. How is that legal?
Yeah.
Like that's
No other profession that would fly. Like we don't have doctors who are working in our hospitals who don't have an MD.
I can't get
So
into
like,
school for medical laboratory assistant because I don't have chemistry.
yeah.
Like what's yeah, that's just bizarre.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
insane. So if you are a resident of Saskatchewan, and I mean, if you feel similarly, if your tax dollars are going to places like this, we feel like asking for the bare minimum is not that big of an ask. And Minister Duncan has no interest in changing those two things. So, I mean, writing to the minister's office, I know it's like, oh, writing letters, what do they do? Well, when things are being looked at by other agencies in the province that keep an eye on government and what they should and shouldn't be doing, when people are writing letters identifying these problems and government ignores it, it's when they do their freedom of information and get, copies of these letters and stuff, that all matters at the end of the day. And it's good for them to be hearing it from other people too, not just us as the student group, because I know like Minister Duncan is totally sick of talking to me and like his office is sick of hearing from me, but I still like I still send emails
Good.
because I'm like, what is this? Like
Well,
I am a
just in the
taxpayer in the
last week,
province.
there's been some stuff going on
I
with him.
did. Yeah, well, I did. Yeah, I've also sent emails in the last week, but
Well,
yeah,
just with his ties with the Regina Christian School,
yeah,
and it's I
yeah.
don't understand why
It's
he continues to do this. Like,
yeah. His bias is blatantly on display for everybody to see. I always appreciate people, on social media that are always sending encouraging words to me or to the other students who are speaking out. I mean, that is so valuable and so important because, we were so brainwashed and conditioned, a lot of us, that we were just bad kids, labeled as bad kids. And if you are free thinking and if you are not toeing the line, you're just a bad kid. So it still, I know for many people, that is always in the background of, their thinking. And so having that positive public support, that's something the student group says all the time. Like the public being so positive and so receiving to the things we're saying blew us all away because we were just expecting hate to come back and just so much like, how dare they say this about a church? So, and
because that's
it's
all you've
not
ever known.
exactly.
One fantastic thing to come out in August of last year was Garrett Davis, formerly Garrett Johnson, brother of current pastor Brian Johnson and son of Keith Johnson. He went on the record saying these allegations are 100% true, admitting he is both a perpetrator and a victim. I'll link that article below. In September of last year, after these allegations came out, Brian Johnson said this.
Many of you are hearing some stories over this last month of different things that are a part of our church history. And here's all I have to say to that right now. We'll talk more in the information meeting. Some of the stories are true. Some of the stories I think are exaggerated. Some of them, I don't know if they're true or not. We've got to trust that the truth is going to come to light, and we want the truth to come to light.
Please keep in mind, this was said after he put out a statement that said in the first paragraph, they're hearing of some of these stories for the first time. And then in the third paragraph goes on to say, they've been apologizing for 7 years. Did you just incriminate yourself? Something about those statements are not adding up. It's the gaslighting for me. I'm going to continue to follow this case closely and provide updates when I can, but I'm going to link Caitlin Erickson's TikTok and Twitter below. She's a great person to follow, not only for updates on this case, but just great content in general. I would like to thank Caitlin Erickson again for chatting with me. I really hope this wasn't too jumbled and all over the place. I'm learning. We're all learning. We're on this journey together. Anyway, as always, I'll have some links below. The statement of claim will be there, as well as a few CBC articles. I'll have some of Kate's TikToks linked below, as well as a really good podcast episode by Occulte Veritatis. It's like a 3-hour long episode, but unbelievably informative. It's anything you want to know about this case, it's in that episode. That's where I got a ton of my information. This one was a little bit longer. Thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, comment, don't join any cults, and I will catch you guys next week. Toodles.